Well, let's talk about our study guide for Test 2 in Economics 201, Principles of Macroeconomics. The nature of this test is that it covers chapters 25, chapter 28, chapter 29, and chapter 30. Remember, chapter 26 we're completely cutting out of the semester, and chapter 27 we'll talk about at a later time. The test has 15 multiple choice questions, which are each worth 50 points. And this is a misprint. It has two problems that are worth 375 points each, not one problem. And you'll see that because I'll tell you what the two problems are. So, chapter 25, potential multiple choice questions are the GDP formula. And I'll tell you, this is how I test the GDP formula. So you're likely to have multiple choice, not any types of problems. Remember when we worked with the cards, or actually I guess in this class we didn't work with the cards, but rather I would throw out a transaction. I would say something like, what type of GDP is it if Bill buys medicinal marijuana from Colorado? And remember that was consumption. And then if I said what type of GDP is it, what component is it if Bill buys marijuana from a street corner in Portsmouth? And the answer is it's not GDP. So all those things, what's a computer if it's used for a business? What's it used if it's used individually? Where's a frivolous lawsuit fit? Expect 2 or 3 questions like that asking you how a transaction fits into GDP. What types of transactions aren't included in GDP? Remember secondhand transactions, leisure, and non-market type transactions. Know a little bit about how US GDP relates to, and of course GDP per capita. So US GDP is total GDP. GDP per capita is the portion of GDP attributable to each citizen. And I want you to know how it compares to large countries like China, Japan, and Germany. Also, there could be questions about the shortcomings of GDP, like, for example, that GDP doesn't consider the environment at all because we're only worried about the dollars. GDP doesn't appropriately weight leisure. Chapter 28 and 29. You would need to be ready to calculate the multiplier. You would need to be able to tell me what's on an aggregate expenditures model graph. Remember John Maynard Keynes's depression quip? He was talking about the stuff in the bottles and dollar bills. And also you'd have to know the marginal propensities to save and consume. And here, you'd have to be able to number crunch the formulas. Chapter 30, you have to know basically what's on each axis of the aggregate demand, aggregate supply graph. You have to know the determinants of aggregate demand. You'd have to be able to draw or consider. In multiple choice, you just have to be able to picture them and understand what they were and answer questions about them. The 3 changes to the aggregate supply curve: immediate short run, and long run. You need to know the determinants of aggregate supply. And also, what's the overall point of the aggregate demand, aggregate supply model? And remember, the overall point is that in the long run, producers will produce anything that consumers want in whatever amounts they want, as long as consumers are willing to pay a reasonable price. There are 2 problems. One of them is an essay type problem where you would walk me through how the multiplier works, thinking about something like the last word, which was called Squaring the Economic Circle, and that appeared on page 611 of your text. So be very comfortable with that and ready to translate that into an essay type question. And then the second problem would have you draw an aggregate demand, aggregate supply curve, which changes 3 times. Immediate short run, long run, and long run. immediate short run, and long run. And then you need to explain it. Now, I just produced a video with the changes on 3 separate graphs, but there's no reason you couldn't do this on one. Your choice. You could do it on 3 graphs or on 1. Good luck. Let me know if I can answer any questions for you.